One organisation working to support at-risk children in Ukraine is Kidsave, which helps orphans and children reunite with family and also find adoptive families. And we can speak now with the co-founder and CEO of Kidsave, Randi Thompson. Randi, thanks for joining us on BBC News. Let's go back to the early days of the Russian invasion in Ukraine. People were fleeing. What was the situation like for those most vulnerable children, those who were living in institutions at that time?
Well, the children in the institutions at the beginning of the war were actually sent back home to families. So many of the institutions emptied out. And then there were the kids that were the most vulnerable, that had special needs, that couldn't leave. So those children were very much at risk, but caregivers stayed with them. The other children, that for the ones that we had placed in families, they were at huge risk because the troops were advancing and their families had to flee, their homes. So what my organization was doing initially was going in and helping people to get out of harm's way. And after we moved the 117 kids that we had placed in families, we decided that we had to help many more people. So overall, we've had over 30,000 people leave war-torn areas.
The war is obviously still ongoing, a fresh push into Ukraine from Russia in recent days. What's the situation like for children in Ukraine now?
Well, I think the children are experiencing lots of trauma. And so one of the things that we've done is develop a war trauma therapy program where we're training social workers and psychologists all over Ukraine to help with kids with their immediate crisis trauma needs. Kids also need to get a respite from the war. So one of the things we're doing this summer is we're bringing a group of 50 children to Western Ukraine, where they'll stay at a center that we're building, and we'll give them trauma therapy. And also, at that point, for kids that can't go back home or have lost their parents, and more kids lose their parents every day in this war, we're going to be bringing Ukrainian families to that center so that they can meet them and hopefully get to know them so they won't ever have to go back to a shelter or an orphanage again.
Of course, many children, as you say, they're still at risk in Ukraine. We've heard President Zelensky put the number at more than 19,000 who've been forcibly taken to Russia. The International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin for that. You're working now to support those children and those orphans, to protect them. What needs to be done, or what can be done?
Well, we're working to protect the children who are still in Ukraine, so that they don't become, eligible for deportation by the Russian army. Those kids, we have been trying to keep them with family, trying to support their families if they have parents, and if not, we're trying to find them new loving homes in Ukraine.
We hear a lot in this country in particular about the need for military aid, military support for Ukraine. But is enough being done on the humanitarian side, not just by the US, but the international community writ large?
That's the age-old question, and we understand that there has to be a great deal of military support, but you can't wait until the war's over to help the children. So absolutely there needs to be support from the entire international community to help the Ukrainian government to be able to support the children, to be able to provide what they need in terms of basic supplies, but also in terms of getting them into a family, because if they're in an institution, that trauma is going to become even more prominent.
And the families that left and were split up and scattered all over Europe and further afield, what is it like for those who want to try and come back?
Many families are coming back. They found that they can't get work in another country, or they have elderly relatives, and so there are a lot of people coming back. It's very difficult, and so the need for humanitarian aid continues. I mean, we have villages that we go to that we're often the only group that comes in, and so the key is to get sustainable solutions. Instead of just bringing water, we want to put water filtration systems in. But but those kids are in the communities where they're not getting food and they're not getting protection. They're obviously at risk.
Of course. Okay, we'll leave it there for the moment. Randi Thompson, CEO of Kidsave, thanks so much for speaking to us on BBC News.
Thank you for